the front. All right, we'll get started in a few minutes. I see some empty chairs. I just would like to wait till we have a little bit more of a full house. And as we're waiting for others to join, I'll just give a recap of what we're going to be discussing in the second portion of this meeting. I think there's a slide for that. Thank you, Laura. So in the discussion topic 2, we're going to now shift gears a little bit, even though these are very interrelated topics. But we're going to now switch gears into the treatment approaches. And as we understand it, it is a multimodal treatment approach. Many different, for some of you, many different aspects of your treatment. And we'd like to get a little bit of a sense of that and then delve a little bit into the specifics, the specific pharmaceutical treatments. In the discussion, I'm going to ask us to focus to make distinct between treatments that you take on a day-to-day basis to target your underlying condition, and then also the treatments that you have to add on once in a while to address specific symptoms or maybe address a flare. Can I have the next slide, please? Oh, is there another? Next. Then we would also like to focus on what aspects of those treatments, what symptoms those treatments address, what are the downsides of those treatments, and how do those downsides, especially if there are health downsides, side effects and other things that really affect your daily life. And then if we have time in our discussion to get at what specific things you'll look for in an ideal treatment for your condition. I'm going to put another plug in for the docket, the website that you can submit comments for those of you on the web and for those of you sitting in the audience. If you want to submit your own responses to all of these questions, we very much encourage it. Even if you brought it up today, it really helps add richness to our understanding. We have, can I go back to the previous slide? We have 5 panel members, just like we did for the first topic. I've asked them to prepare a few minutes of remarks just to give us that good foundation for the discussion. I'm going to let them introduce themselves as they come, as they begin. And we will start with Deborah. Can we? No, you know what? We won't start with Deborah. That is so unfair. That is so unfair. I knew that was going to happen. No, it's not. Okay. We will start with Jan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Just remember to speak into the microphone.
Thank you. I sincerely appreciate the opportunity the FDA has provided the fibromyalgia community to speak today. This is important. My name is Jan Chambers. I'm the president of the National Fibromyalgia and Chronic Pain Association. I have had fibromyalgia for 8 years following a hysterectomy. In seeking a diagnosis to find out what was causing the increasing pains, sorry, I ran down that hallway, and debilitating symptoms, I spent over $100,000 of my personal money beyond what my medical insurance would pay to seek a diagnosis for what was happening to me. I knew that an early diagnosis of fibromyalgia and treatment could make a positive difference in my quality of life in the long term. Yes, I received a diagnosis of fibromyalgia after spending a lot of money, but that did not include any answers as to what to do next. My illness included a lot of things: metabolic syndrome, migraines, polycystic ovarian syndrome, cognitive difficulties, functional loss, and unrefreshing sleep. I practically laid on the couch or on my bed for the next 16 months with pillows supporting my arms and legs so they wouldn't touch each other because it caused more pain. And during this time, and out of desperation, I convinced a very sympathetic surgeon to remove 1/4 of my breast because I couldn't lower my arm to touch my side. And that very sensitive spot, very painful spot, I now believe was a tender point. I was fortunate because my eldest daughter was in medical school at the time, and she was able to guide me to where to look and what research to follow. It was difficult for me to read that research because I had such significant brain fog, but I knew that education is empowering. And because so many parts of my body were becoming dysfunctional, I paid attention to the broadly accepted theory of central sensitization in fibromyalgia. To me, that meant that my central nervous system was out of control and affecting all of the systems in my body. It made sense that calming my central nervous system was going to be the answer for me and to stop the life-altering changes that were occurring with fibromyalgia. Since electrifying pains were coming from my neck, I found a chiropractor who used more physical therapy than chiropractic techniques. From several whiplashes throughout my life, I knew from the x-rays that my vertebrae were severely misaligned. I was also diagnosed with forward head syndrome. I used the FDA website to locate and approved devices for spinal rehabilitation and found one called the Pedibon system. The chiropractor I chose knew how to use rehabilitative equipment. For almost 2 years, I worked 3 times daily with the physical therapy techniques and these tools. Gradually restoring the natural curve in my neck reduced the horrific pains and returned most of my daily functionality. Through the physical rehabilitation, I reduced the cervical stenosis or the narrowing of the spinal cord canal, and the constant stretch and pressure on my spinal cord was stopped. Reducing emotional stress and learning relaxation skills were also very important. I still have some fibromyalgia symptoms, but they are not completely debilitating like they were 8 years ago. I believe that there is a large subset of people with fibromyalgia who have what is called positional cervical cord compression, or PC3. For several years, the fibromyalgia research has been available about the likely relationship between fibromyalgia and spinal cord compression, Chiari-1 malformations, and the upper part of the spine. As a patient, I convinced my chiropractor to do a small clinical study on fibromyalgia patients with severe neck pain. The results were similar to mine. Since the initial year of physical therapy, my daily life has continually improved. I still have to be mindful of my posture and stress levels. If I overdo my physical activities, like carrying heavy grocery sacks and heavy housework, some pain does return. With heat and performing the physical therapy work for a couple of days, the pain can stop or reside. The downsides of my treatment are that there are currently not very many chiropractors in the United States who know how to use effective physical rehabilitation and instead use a lot of spinal manipulation techniques. I look for holistic approaches to treating the fibromyalgia body as well as multidisciplinary approach that may include medication, better nutrition, and psychological therapy. Thank you for this opportunity today.
Thank you, Jan. And then we'll have Gwen. Can you pull the microphone? Yeah.
Yes. Hello, my name's Gwen Herman. I'm the executive director and founder of Pain Connection. We work with people in chronic pain. My pain started 19 years ago when I was in a car accident. I was rear-ended. My pain started in my neck, went up into my head, shoulders, and then throughout my body. So fibromyalgia, TMJ, autoimmune system problems, gluten intolerant, dairy intolerant, irritable bowel, a few things. And what I had to learn was just how to learn how to relive again because of all the changes in my life. So what I use right now is a multimodal approach in dealing with chronic pain, which consists of medications. I am on Cymbalta, and that gives me energy. And I know a lot of people makes them tired, and it helps with my overall body pain. I also use trazodone to help me sleep at night. Sometimes have trigger point injections. I get a Myers cocktail infusion, which it helps with fatigue. So when I get really low on energy, I'll go in and I'll have an infusion. I do a lot of Chinese medications. I have a special formula that's made for me that helps with my sleep because I can't sleep at night because of the pain. And my worst position is lying down in bed. So that's horrible when you're feeling tired all the time, because to go to bed to me is the most painful thing. So that's why I need something to knock me out right away. I use guided imagery. That helps me all the time. Just sitting here, I could just use it, and it helps lower my pain level. I do a lot of vitamins and supplements. I use different gels for my necks. I use patches, for my back, for my legs. Ice I use all the time, even though I go to a Chinese doctor and he tells me ice is not good for my neck because it's stopping the blood flow, and I try not to do that, but nothing brings down that pain as ice will on my neck. I go to weekly acupuncture now. In the beginning, I would go 3 times a week. I went to 4 acupuncturists before I found the one that I have now, and I've learned that there's all different types of acupuncture. So she does something that's called the balance method, and she does Taiwanese acupuncture, and she doesn't go into the source of my pain, so she works on the outer extremities, and that helps me a great deal. And then I use like little tacks during the week just to prolong the treatment. I also learned how to pace myself, and I usually do that, but when I don't do it, that's when I have that brain fog, and that's when I fall or bump into things. I do fall a lot if I am in pain and I'm not, if I don't rest and take care of myself. I do a lot of psychosocial techniques with myself by changing the pain messages in my mind of how I respond to pain. And I try to live in the present. I don't go back in the past, but I stay right now of what I'm able to do right now. I have a number of different healthcare providers. Since it's 19 years, it's taken me a long time to get a team that I can work with. I have an excellent pain doctor now who's a physiatrist. I have a nurse practitioner who's a herbalist and also a nutritionist, so I'm on a lot of different herbs, and I had to change my whole diet because I'm gluten intolerant and can't have dairy. I also go to an acupuncturist. My primary care doctor is an osteopath, and she understands about chronic pain. And I go to a Chinese doctor, for my formulas, and I take rhubarb to help me, stay regular. That's what Jacob was talking about. Rhubarb is wonderful. I knew I was deficient in some vitamins, so I was taking vitamin D3. My test came back really low, but then I took a test, a SpectraCell test, and it came back that I was deficient in 5 different nutrients. So I'm on all those vitamins now, and one of them I really believe has helped with my focus. And another thing that helps with my focus is doing Sudoku crossword puzzles to keep my mind intact. So that's the main thing, of growing those, the gray matter back in my brain. Let's see what else. I use all different lotions for my neck. I use Voltaren gel. I make my own lotion that I learned from my herbalist with lavender, St. John's wort oil, aloe vera, and I use that. I grow my own feverfew for migraines. I could just pick it and, eat a few of the leaves. That helps with migraines. Drink 4 to 5 glasses of jasmine green tea a day, which is really good. I take fish oil every day. I don't eat fried foods. I tried doing gentle stretches, but exercise is very hard for me. I have gained a lot of weight. Some of the medicines just put weight on me unbelievably. And then I had to decide, what were the pros and cons of it. So exercise is very, very hard for me. So I try to do stretches. It seems like every time I work myself up, I'll hurt myself. And it doesn't take much to hurt myself. And then I'm back to 0 again. And then I'm afraid to do it again. So even though people say it's really good to do exercise, you really have to be careful. And then a lot of times if I do go traveling, after what happens, I may be out for a week or a month even. It takes me a long time to get back to where I was beforehand.
Gwen, if I could ask you a question about, you've described so many of this many, many, many things. Overall, as your sort of whole approach, would you say that you feel that you are well managed a satisfactory amount of the time for you?
Yeah, I function. I have a quality of life. I'm happy I could do things, but I have pain 24 hours a day, and I'm still looking for something to help me even have a better quality of life.
Mm-hmm. So even with all of these things, you still have, you're still looking for something else?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Great. Did you have any other final thoughts that you wanted to share?
There was just two other things. I use a sun box for seasonal affective disorder, and I use a mouth guard for grinding, and that's really helped a lot for migraines. So, we just have to use different treatments to help ourselves. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Gwen. And now Sarah.
Just the big red button. Okay, I learned earlier today that I'm representing the 3% as I am not yet 30. So I've actually had fibromyalgia for 5 years. So I've had it since I was, I've actually had fibromyalgia for 5 years. So I was diagnosed when I was 22. So prior to the onset of my symptoms, I was very active. I liked to run, play basketball, those kinds of things. And my symptoms came on slowly. At first, I just had a stiff neck. But then the symptoms progressively got worse to the point where I was experiencing excruciating pain on a daily basis. So naturally, I went to my primary care physician for help, and they ran every test in the book. And as we know, there's no test that's going to show up fibromyalgia. So my PCP looked at me one day, and she's like, I know you're sick, but I don't have a clue. So that's when she referred me to the rheumatology clinic at UVA Charlottesville. And it took them about a second to tell me that I had fibromyalgia. They then told me that I was too young to take any of the medications that were currently FDA approved at the time. It was 2009. They said they were chemicals and I shouldn't put them in my body, and the recommendation was to spend just a little bit more time in a rocking chair. So naturally, I was devastated. I remember feeling alone and like the medical community just didn't understand me. So the turning point for me was when I discovered acceptance and commitment therapy. And basically, the tenets of that is quit fighting it and find a way to live with the cards you've been dealt, basically. So today I manage my symptoms by paying close attention to bodily cues. I know that pain in one of my shoulders means that I need to stop what I'm doing and rest immediately. Another cue for me is extreme fatigue. I need to stop and rest before I get overtired. Also, I know that I can't sit, stand, or lie down for an extended period of time. And in most cases, if I keep moving, I do okay. And I can offset most flare-ups by laying on a heating pad and just relaxing. And sometimes I'll take an OTC pain reliever to help with that. If I have a really bad flare-up, I will take 500 milligrams of hydrocodone and 100 milligrams of Imagery. That's my combination. But to give a little perspective, I take about 1 bottle of hydrocodone a year. So I don't take medications. I don't take any like everyday medications or anything like that. So as long as I constantly monitor my bodily cues, I can engage in more activities. Now the downside of this is that my current treatment regimen does not make the pain go away entirely ever. It doesn't treat the bodily fatigue or the cognitive fatigue. And as a graduate student, I'm actually in the final year of my doctoral training program for psychology. The cognitive fatigue is very difficult. I know recently I had my oral comprehensive exams, and in preparing for that, I was so worried that I would get up there and forget like common words that you should know as a psychologist in training, that I actually had a panic attack and had to go to the doctor. So I mean, that's how bad the fibro fog can cause the anxiety. But getting back to the treatments, I don't think there's a single pill out there that can treat all the symptoms of fibromyalgia, from the pain to the all-over pain to the bodily fatigue, the cognitive fatigue. I think there's going to have to be some kind of a treatment regimen. And as a doctoral candidate in psychology, I have to recommend therapy as well, and I know that's been talked about, but I think it's going to take a combination of medications and therapy to be the proper treatment.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you.
And now we'll have Nancy.
My name is Nancy Ryan. I am 48 years old and live in Arlington, Virginia. I work full-time as a manager of a public library. I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia in 1995. The fact is, I'm a person that experiences more pain than many people. Some of it can be explained by biology or neurophysiology, but some of it is a mystery to me and others. I appreciate the opportunity to share some of my story what I have tried, what works and what doesn't, as well as my hopes for the future of fibromyalgia research and treatment. Over the past 18 years, I have tried an alphabet soup of medications, from amitriptyline to Zoloft. I counted the ones I could remember. It was 22. I found the FDA-approved drugs, Lyrica and Cymbalta, caused more problems and didn't alleviate the pain. Lyrica addressed sleep, but it did this too well. I felt like a walking zombie and wanted to sleep all the time and had no motivation. It did not address my pain at all. I had a bad reaction to Cymbalta. Other medications I have tried, such as Elavil, Tramadol, Flexeril, and Effexor, also caused problems and gave very little benefit. Starting in 2008, I participated in 3 research studies. I am a human guinea pig. This included an fMRI brain scan study where all medications were eliminated and exercise was the only intervention. We discovered that exercise as a sole therapy is not a cure-all. In fact, I was in a mess of pain, anxiety, and depression when the study ended. After the exercise study, I embarked on a journey back to stability. I share my experience with the exercise research study to illustrate that exercise is only one part of the treatment that has gotten me to where I am today. Treating fibromyalgia requires a multimodal approach. I'm happy to report that I have arrived at a custom system of treatments that works for me, and most of my symptoms are now well managed. I exercise, mostly Pilates and some strength training and cardio. I have a physical therapist who helps by treating acute problems. I attend psychotherapy with an excellent psychiatrist, and this has helped me to understand that how I am feeling affects my life, and vice versa. Biofeedback training and breathing exercises are also very helpful, and I treat myself to massages and dry needling for myofascial pain. My medication cocktail includes medications targeted at my specific symptoms: verapamil and Botox injections for migraine control, a custom antidepressant mix of Remeron that gives much-needed deep sleep, and low doses of Zoloft and Abilify to address depression, anxiety, and some of the pain. With the insomnia and depression in remission, I'm much more able to emotionally deal with the remaining pain symptoms. I am able to work full-time despite my symptoms, but this impacts my off-work downtime, as I have to rest and recover when I'm not working, or I may be in too much pain to enjoy activities. This makes socializing and making plans difficult. I have gained a great deal of weight on my current medications. This has been disconcerting, but manageable with diet. The medications also seem to cause my brain fog and memory problems to be worse. An ideal treatment would address the all-over pain, insomnia, and fatigue, while also allowing clear-headed thinking and memory without fatigue or weight gain. Tall order. I have had a rough go of it, and it is very complicated. I have left out a lot of details. I would say most experiences with fibromyalgia are complicated, but I have found a combination of therapies that works for me. I have broken down my symptoms and addressed them one by one. I'm doing well. My wish for the future of fibromyalgia research is that a more discrete definition of fibromyalgia can be developed and biomarkers found to potentially identify probable cause so that treatments can be more targeted. There is no plain vanilla fibromyalgia patient. We are a Baskin-Robbins array of varied symptoms and presentations. To expect there to be one medication that will address all of the symptoms of this diverse population is naive. Fibromyalgia researchers do not appear to have generated scientifically acceptable and testable hypotheses of causation. Until efforts are directed to this very important matter, fibromyalgia research will continue to remain in a state of limbo, and treatment will continue to be hit or miss. I read once that one FDA-approved medication for fibromyalgia helps 30% of people get only 50% relief from their symptoms. This does not appear to me to be a very effective treatment. Thank you to the FDA for this opportunity to share my experiences and thoughts for the future of fibromyalgia treatment.
Thank you very much, Nancy. And finally, we have Deborah.
First, I'd like to thank the FDA representatives for allowing us to have this day. Secondly, and most importantly, I'd like to thank Sarah and her group that did an outstanding job to get all of us together both in December and now. My name is Deborah Ward. I'm 62. I'm married, and I'm a writer. I was diagnosed with arthritic TM joints and fibromyalgia 28 years ago. I include my TM joints because they were the reason I was first diagnosed with fibromyalgia. My TMJ specialist, asked me certain questions, and he said, I think I want you to go to a friend of mine. My brother calls my pill bag a drugstore, and I guess it does appear to that to a lot of healthy people. I take 15 different drugs a day, not willingly, grudgingly, but I still have to take them. The drugs associated with my TM joints and fibro symptoms are Neurontin, Zenaflex, Cymbalta, Motrin, Fioricet is needed, Trazodone for sleep, lidocaine patches, I use my TENS unit a lot, and hydrocodone when absolutely necessary. I also receive 200 milligrams of Botox injections every 3 months. This is my only treatment that isn't covered by healthcare insurance. I also have radiofrequency nerve ablation done bilaterally from C6-7 to T7 every 6.5 months, and now enjoy an epidural every 2.5 months because of the shooting pain down into the top of both of my shoulder blades, and the hypersensitivity to my skin, where it makes it difficult for anyone to even touch me. In between these treatments, I try to swim and use the elliptical. Unfortunately, there's just too many times when there's a downtime in between the two different types of treatment, like with the Botox or the nerve ablations, where my body just gives up and I neither have the energy nor the motivation to try and do the swimming because I can't turn my arm over. Many years ago, I did try acupuncture and was disappointed when my acupuncturist sat me down and agreed that it wasn't going to work for me. Nor did the herbal medicines I tried. Unfortunately, some of us are unable to handle our pain systems without the crutch of drugs, no matter how badly we'd like to try that. My treatments help control most of the muscle spasms, some of the nerve pain, neck and back pain, but do nothing to help with the achy feeling I wake up every morning with, my constant lack of energy, the brain fog that's all too often embarrassing, as you've already heard, and the inconsistent sleep patterns that worries my husband a lot. Early in my treatment, I used a mild muscle relaxer, an anti-inflammatory, and a sleeping aid. I had trigger point injections using 2% lidocaine, physical therapy that included massage, chiropractic care, TENS unit, biofeedback, and exercise. And the last 3 I still continue. Within 2 years after being diagnosed, both the muscle relaxer and the sleep aid had to be replaced and to stronger drugs. And then 4 years later, my trigger point injections stopped working. So my rheumatologist referred me to a neurologist who was doing Botox injections. I have been done into my neck and my upper back, all around the shoulder blades and down the spine. It feels like a bee sting with every prick of the needle, but believe me, it works. It hasn't for a lot of people, but it has worked for me for over 11 years.
Any final thoughts about what's worked and what hasn't?
Yes, naturally the drugs have worked. There are always those side effects that are not helpful. The Botox has helped a lot, and now the radiofrequency nerve ablation that I have done every 6.5 months makes a big difference in coordination now with the, there we go, brain fog. The other treatment I have to have. to go. I think all of those have worked well for me, and I think my physicians have seen where I'm at a roadblock, and they know of different items that I need to try, and if it doesn't work out, then they go back to the drawing board and work with me.
Great. Thank you so much, Deborah. And thank you to all the panelists. I'm going to... Takes a second. Okay, there we go. I'm going to save clarifying questions, and then as those topics arise, if you have questions that you want to address FDA. Again, I want to thank the panelists. Please, a round of applause. It's a lot to be up here in front of everyone and the web, and we very much appreciate it. And what I think is so great about this panel that was up here is, to my understanding, they demonstrated the wide range of this complex treatment regimen. We heard everyone did something different, and everyone named, I believe, more than 15 things that they are doing. And I just want to get a show of hands. I see a lot of heads nodding, but let's get a show of hands of how many of you saw your own treatments reflected in what you heard. Okay, yeah, great. And did anyone? We won't get into this now. Does anyone do something completely different? Okay, so we have a few very different things. Okay, so we'll delve into those, and remind me if I forget to ask you that again. Let's start with a polling question. If it works this time, our fingers are crossed. Oh, do we still have clickers? If someone doesn't have a clicker, raise your hand. Okay, that's fine. And I'm going to go through this while you get the clickers. So, what are you currently doing to treat your condition or its symptoms? And these are just very, broad buckets of types of treatments. But this will give us a sense of the wide range of treatment approaches. You can check all that apply. Prescription medications, over-the-counter medications, exercise, physical therapy, massage or acupuncture, dietary supplements or other diet changes, lifestyle changes such as pacing activities or avoiding stressful situations, behavioral therapies such as pain programs or support groups, some other therapies that have not yet been mentioned that don't fit into one of those other categories, you're not sure, or you're not currently doing or taking any therapies. So I'll give you a few minutes because I'm imagining that many of you have many of these. Okay. It sounds like people have finished, so we'll go to the results. Okay. Not surprising based on what we heard from the panel comments. Lots of you are taking lots of stuff, with the highest being the lifestyle changes such as pacing activities or avoiding stressful situations by almost all of you in the room here. And 85% of you are taking prescription medications, which I guess means that 15% of you are not. Next, let's see. Exercise, physical therapy, dietary supplements, and diet changes. I think the bottom line here is that it sounds like you're taking just about everything to tackle this condition. On the web, what are we? The webcast has very similar results, except 80% of people take some sort of over-the-counter product, and only 63% do some sort of exercise, and 53% for physical therapy. Okay, thank you. All right. So we want, just like we did in topic 1, we want to delve a little bit more detail into some specific things. And we're going to start by asking you to talk a bit more about the prescription medications that you take on a daily or very regular basis with the hope of addressing the underlying condition. The 3 drugs that are approved for the condition, Lyrica, Cymbalta, Savella, some other antidepressant or some other anti-seizure medications that you're taking on a daily basis. I'm going to ask for a show of hands because we didn't tease that out in the polling question. How many of you in the room are taking one of those types of medications on a very, very regular basis? Okay. And just so we have a sense, how many do not? Okay. So it looks like more of you take them than not, but that there still is a sizable number who don't take any of these. We heard a little bit about some of these up here, but I want to ask if you could just focus on a symptom. What symptoms are you finding that these treatments are addressing the best? Okay, we have over there. Oh, we'll wait for the microphone.
My name is Cheryl. I think y'all named my first time when I got on here, but vertigo, basically for the Cymbalta, Lyrica for the onset pain that you deal with when you have fibromyalgia. It kind of calms it some, but you still have that pain, but you can live with it when I'm on my Lyrica. And I also take lorazepam for a sleep aid at night.
Okay. Anyone else want to follow up on that? On what these treatments address best? Okay, over here.
I've been taking trazodone since almost the beginning of my diagnosis, and it helps me sleep. I really don't have any sleep problems because of that.
Anyone else? Okay, we've got a couple here. We'll go to we'll go in the back, and then we'll go to Elizabeth and Shay.
I am taking a cocktail, and it's been trial and error. I have been on Ambien for years. I'd rather not be. Lyrica, nortriptyline, and tramadol for pain. I exercise regularly.
How well are those that you're taking regularly? How well are they addressing your sleep issues?
Well, it's like this woman over here had said. It manages it. It doesn't take the pain away. I could feel it breaking through at certain times of the day. With the Lyrica, if I miss a dose, I feel it, the neuropathy, the pain, throbbing.
Okay.
So I take it twice a day, 250.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. We had Elizabeth and then Shay.
Just in terms of the prescription medications, I'm a little bit different with the Lyrica. I only take 100 milligrams a day. I work when I can work part-time as a professor, so I get too many cognitive impacts with Lyrica. I also have to take it at sleep because about 40 minutes after I take it, I get severely depressed. No reason why. My husband will say, "Why are you depressed?" I'm like, "No reason, just feel miserable." That's one. Imitrex I do a lot for the headaches. And then something that's slightly different is kind of up for debate. The FDA has not approved it yet, may not, is Limbrel. It's a medical food, and I take that because I have von Willebrand's disease, so I can't take NSAIDs. And for some reason, the Limbrel doesn't cause my factor VIII to go down as much and contribute to additional bleeding and bruising. So that's one that has worked for me. That's sort of in this weird medical food. Not sure what the clinical trials say in terms of efficacy compared to NSAIDs, but NSAIDs aren't an option for me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, we'll go to Shay.
Thanks. Hi, Shay here again. I want to kiss the people that created Lyrica. It doesn't make pain go away by any means, but I was crippled. I was just a huddled up mess, not accomplishing anything. And I had been on a lot of different drugs already. And when they finally put me on Lyrica, because I was in the military, so they have to try everything before they get to the more expensive drugs. So after I came down off of all the other drugs and the fun experience that is, and started with Lyrica, it was really, my husband said it was the first time he saw me smiling in a long time. So, it doesn't fix everything, but it has helped a lot. But with it, I take Wellbutrin in the morning. I'm probably a huge serotonin toxicity risk at this point because of the particular cocktail I'm taking, but the Lyrica will keep me sleeping all day if I don't do something. Like, my energy level is so low. So they put me on Wellbutrin to try to help counteract that, and it works pretty well, and also helps curb a little bit of the weight gain because you don't have an appetite anymore. So,
Okay.
there you go.
Anyone in the back there? We have.
My name is Bonnie. I'm hearing all of these, everyone taking medicine, pain meds, and they help them. I have been on, I can't tell you how many over the last 18 years. I take a new one. It'll last for maybe 2 years or something, and then nothing. So I go to another one for 2 years, then it stops. I have been on, well, like I say, everything everybody's talking about. The last ones that I have taken and had to stop was Ultram or Ultrasat. I was on that for about the longest time, maybe 5-6 years, when it stopped. I am now taking 10.5 milligrams of hydrocodone 3 times a day. It just barely helps. And I'm also on 100 milligrams of Neurontin 2 to 3 times a day. I swear by that. I cannot take Lyrica, did not help, and it gave me, it swelled my mouth and my tongue. Cymbalta did the same thing, plus it kept me from sleeping well, and the Savella did not help at all. So this is where I am. I don't know. I do go to a pain doctor in Hagerstown, Maryland. I don't know what is next if the hydrocodone stops, because he's told me that he will not raise the dosage anymore on that. I have been on fentanyl.
Can I ask a follow-up question to this?
Yes.
Because what you're talking about, these treatments, how long do you give a treatment? Approximately, how long do you kind of take it to before you would make a decision about whether it's working or not?
It's years. Like I say, I was on Ultram for 4 or 5 years or longer, and actually I stayed on it. It had stopped working completely, but I was still taking it, trying to give it a chance. I have been told that my body does not absorb nutrients or vitamins or just about anything very well, and I think this is my top problem, that things do not help me as they do a lot of other people, or they don't help as long, because I've been told my body gets used to it, and then it says, I don't want this anymore, I'm not going to take it.
Okay,
so this is where I am at this point.
Can I ask this follow-up question kind of in the room of how long you typically would try a medicine before you would expect to be able to say whether it's working or just make the determination that it's not working for you? I see in the back, I'm sorry, I've forgotten your name. Yeah, Lori in the back, please. And then we'll come up, and then we'll go over there.
About 5 years ago, I was prescribed Lyrica, and I was on it for 2 days before I decided I couldn't do it. I'm a psychotherapist, so having that, I felt like I was high, so I stopped. Out of desperation, about 6 months ago, I'm just coming out of a 6-month flare-up now. 6 months ago, I was given the Lyrica again, asked for it. Let me try it again, let me try something else. It took a while for me to not feel that, not have the side effects. I pushed past it, I pushed through it. I started with very small doses, and now up to 500 a day. And I don't have any side effects at all from it. It doesn't work 100%, the pain's still there.
Okay, is this resonating with you, that you're trying it for a long time, having to push through some side effects to be able to determine its effectiveness for you? I see a lot of head nods. Do any of my colleagues want to follow up on this question? Okay. All right, let's, you can keep talking about the effectiveness if you want to, but I want to make sure we get to the downsides of these treatments if there are others. I know we've talked about weight gain. How many, if you feel comfortable raising your hand, have heard of someone who's had a problem with weight gain or had your own issues with weight gain because of a medication you're on? Okay. Significant. I think we've heard about it enough. Are there other downsides that you would like to raise? Okay. Oh, lots of hands going up. We'll go back over there, and then we'll come over here.
Hi, I'm Sharon. I'm taking Cymbalta. My downside is that 8 to 12 bowel movements a day. You know, you can't get a lot of work done if you're in the bathroom, and that's what I find. It also cut the appetite. I have lost considerable. I've gotten back in some pants that I couldn't get back into. I've gotten back into some shirts I couldn't get back into, but still those bowel movements, I'm sore at the end of the day.
Okay. Others?
Hi, my name is Nikki. A lot of the prescription medications I've been on, tramadol, various doses, opiates, they all affect my sleep. So when I take them, they may help my pain a little bit, but I'm awake pretty much all night, which then just starts this horrible feedback, this positive feedback of being in more pain because I'm not getting enough sleep, so I take more of the medication and I sleep even less. That's my biggest side effect with a lot of these drugs.
Great. I'm going to follow. Is it Nikki?
Yes.
Nikki, I'm going to follow up on Nikki's question because we talked a lot about sleep difficulties earlier. And this is a very difficult thing to tease out, but in your experience, is it easy to attribute your sleep problems with your underlying condition, the treatments that you're on, or there's absolutely no way to tell? So first, you would say it's because of your underlying condition, if you want to raise your hand, and not treatments. Okay? And then raise your hand if you think it's definitely within your experience, your treatments, because of your treatments that affects your sleep. Okay. And if you can't tell at all, okay. So there's a mix. It's a wide range of experiences. Okay. Other downsides? Oh, wait, before we do that, let's let Gwen and then Sarah go.
Yeah, nobody's mentioned that it affects your sexual life also. A lot of these medications that men can't perform or women, have problems also.
Okay. Okay, so it's Sarah, and then we'll go back out here.
I was just gonna say the only treatment that I use that's prescribed is I'll use an opiate pain medication when I'm having a really bad flare-up. But the downside to that is basically I almost feel high off of the pill. So therefore I can't sleep, I can't do anything. So that's the downside. I have to take it to make the pain go away, but then I can't sleep. Okay. So it's a trade-off.
Okay. Other downsides there.
I'm taking, two opiate, or I'm taking tramadol and a Butrans patch because the other things don't work for me. I've tried Savella. I ended up in the hospital because my blood pressure was so high and I was vomiting and I couldn't keep any food down. I just felt horrible. I was actually diagnosed with fibromyalgia when I was on Cymbalta off-label for migraines, so obviously it wasn't helping my pain at all. It did help somewhat for migraines. It also made me gain a lot of weight and made me very sweaty. So I've also tried Neurontin. That didn't help for pain. Amitriptyline made me gain a lot of weight, did not help for pain. So it's hard, I think, to find something that does help. And one thing I wanted to bring up is I think doctors, when they see if something doesn't work for you and you are on opiates, I feel like they look at you as you're drug seeking, even though it's well documented that I've tried multiple other things. It's in my chart. I've tried the other things. They see it. And the opiates, they don't help 100%. But it's something that I can get out of bed and I can walk my dog and I can function somewhat. I'm not able to work anymore, but I can still function somewhat. If there was another treatment, sure, I would love to take it, but for now, this is what works.
Thank you, Valerie. I saw some head nods. We'll come here and then.
Quickly run through all three of the approved medications. Lyrica made me sleepy, stupid, and angry. And those were like week 1, week 2, and week 3. We weren't getting any less side effects. We were just adding one every week. I was getting ready to go back to work at that point after a period off, and I couldn't continue. So week 4 was when I said, can't do that anymore. Cymbalta, after 6 days, gave me reduced vision to the point where I had to make the computer letters on the screen about the size of these slides. And so 6 days on that was all I managed. Savella absolutely was wonderful for the pain, but after a year of kind of soldiering through, I felt like I was in Groundhog Day in the first trimester of pregnancy. For all the women who have been pregnant and had morning sickness, it was like a year of continual morning sickness. I never got past it. I reduced the dosage back to, I think, 25 milligrams, still couldn't get past it. And I hated giving it up, but I couldn't do it. My wonder drug was Vioxx. Thanks, guys. I took that one little pill every day and I felt normal for 5 years. But my current treatment regimen is, my primary fibromyalgia drug is Neurontin. I'm actually taking Release, which is, you guys know the extended release version that's come out recently, and that's doesn't take all the pain away, but it makes me functional. The only thing that I take that has no side effects and works well for me is hydrocodone, which I take for breakthrough pain. No side effects whatsoever except pain relief, and that's the drug that allows me to live my life without fear of the pain because I have a tool to manage it.
Thank you very much, Sue. I want to ask a question. We'll take 2 more. We'll take those 2, and then we'll take 3 more. We'll take Lewis too. You have so much to say, everyone. Okay, so let's go with Lewis first.
I can't remember whether I tried Savella or not, but both Cymbalta and Lyrica, very quickly, they made me so dizzy and with so much vertigo that I just couldn't do it. It seemed like the floor was 100 feet away from me, and I was clumsy walking into things. The best medications I've taken is, in fact, opioids. And I am on high-dose opioids because I have I have intractable pain, but I also have, I'm thinking of the genetic defect which keeps me from metabolizing them very well, so it takes very large quantities for me to. And it's very effective and it works. No side effects. And for the last 3.5 years, I've had the best quality of life that I've had since I was a teenager.
Thank you, Lewis. You see a lot of head nodding. Okay, 2 more over there, and then I want to go on to the over-the-counter medications and ask a few questions about those.
Another reminder for those on the web, we'll be queuing up the phone in about 10 minutes, so you should dial in now.
And what we are looking for to preview what we're asking for on the phone is specific health aspects of a treatment that you would say that would make an ideal treatment if they addressed this specific aspect of my health. Okay. You know, I'm actually going to I want to make sure we get a question in about the over-the-counter, because I think we're hearing a lot about the prescription medication, pain medications, that you take on an as-needed basis. But I want to get the complement of that, the non-prescription. We heard some non-prescription medications are taken. Can you raise your hand again for me if you take a non-prescription medication on what you would say is a not regular basis, but when needed? Okay. And do you find those effective? Can you raise your hand again if you find it effective? Okay. Can we just have a few examples of how well those are addressing your pain? Okay, so We'll go in the back there. Oh, no, I'll let you guys choose. You guys are better at that.
Well, this is not for pain, but it's for sleep. I take melatonin, and I think this young woman over here was talking about it, and 3 milligrams, 1.5 to 3 milligrams per day, and you need to take it at the right time of day, and that's important. It's non-addictive. It really has virtually no side effects, and this is with clinical double-blind placebo studies. And the other thing I take is vitamin D. And I take vitamin D because most of us find it very difficult to get enough vitamin D by synthesizing it in our skin, and because most of us live indoors and we're not outside very much. So get your vitamin D levels checked, 25-hydroxy D3, get them checked, and talk to your physician about how much you need.
Mm-hmm. I think what you're talking about is something that you would take on a daily basis. So let me ask for a follow-up on looking at those, the pain or sleep meds that you would take on a sort of as-needed basis, and get a sense of how well those are working.
I am a big user of BioFreeze. When my pain is bad on particular days, I just feel like for something that's topical, especially because I'm single and it's a spray, and it's hard to get your back when you have nobody to do it for you. So I found that BioFreeze gives me a lot of relief, particularly if I have pain and I'm struggling to fall asleep because of it. I'll spray it on shortly before I go to bed, and that will freeze it enough to get me to be able to fall asleep.
Okay.
I use Bayer Advance. It's 500 milligrams per pill. You get this package to 2 pills, which adds up to 1,000 milligrams. But when I told my doctor what I was doing, she said I was taking too much. So I cut back to PRN 500 milligrams as needed.
Okay.
As an alternative, I take isogenics, which is like a liquid food that I take normally like once a day, but then I supplement it with what they call an accelerator pill, and that helps to increase my energy throughout the day.
Are there any web comments on, oh, I'm sorry, Sharon has a question.
There's been a little discussion of opioids, and I have 2 questions about them. One is, I heard now twice something of a paradoxical reaction almost, where people were having trouble sleeping on opioids. Usually it's sort of the opposite. So I'd be interested in knowing if that's something that comes up a little bit more often in this population, in patients with fibro. And I'd also like to get a sense, if we could, I don't know if people are comfortable or not, how many people are using opioids either as needed or more regularly.
And then I have a follow-up to that question, which is, of those people, how many of you are having trouble getting those pills?
Okay. So maybe I can take the second one, then the third one, and then the first one. So a show of hands, just who's comfortable admitting taking opioids on a regular or periodic basis? Okay. Oh, yeah. And then how many of you have difficulty getting your prescription? We heard an example of that. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh, so you have to take a test. Mm-hmm. Okay. And now to address Sharon's question about the sleep, for how many of you taking those opioids are finding sleep difficulties? Is that correct? Okay. Okay. And I think we heard about that. Do you want more elaboration? Okay, great. So let's go into, we're cutting close on time. I am going to, we have, I think, about 6 people for the open public comment. So I'm going to steal a little bit of time for the open public comment so that we can ask a few more questions, and we need to go to the web and let the folks on the phone. Before we do that, James, are there any additional thoughts that have come up about the pain medications or the prescription medications, effectiveness or downsides?
I think most of the comments have been very in line with what's been discussed in the room. I think the overarching consensus is that it takes a long time to find the right combination of drugs, supplements, exercise, diet, lifestyle, alternative therapies. There's a whole list of things mostly overlapping with what have been discussed in the room. I think one of the main things that hasn't been discussed in relation to pain is the use of marijuana to treat pain, and especially for breakthrough pain for patients that are on opioids or other pain medicines.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. All right, there are a few questions. We don't have much time to get into the non-drug therapies, but we did hear, the panelists gave great examples of what they're on. So I am going to ask two show of hand questions. Because I think, let's have first 3 show of hand questions. Remind me who would consider non-drug therapies to be a major component of their treatment regimen. Okay, so not everyone, but a large proportion of you. How many would you say that collectively your non-drug therapies or lifestyle changes are as important as any prescription medications you're on? Okay. And then how many of you would say that they're important, but they can't match the benefit of those prescription medications? Okay. Okay, thank you. I think we've talked enough about that, so we have the sense of how they're working and what works for you. I want to conclude with the discussion about the overall management and about the ideal treatment. And we've discussed a lot of this topic kind of throughout the other discussions that we've had. But I think it would be useful for us to see with a show of hands that thinking about, this is what Nancy explained. Thinking about all of your therapies together, that whole regimen. How many of you share Nancy's perspective? I'm going to try to paraphrase. That although you still battle your condition every day, you feel like you are managing as best as you can expect. Okay. And how many of you feel that the converse? Although you're taking as much as whatever you can, that really you cannot say that your condition is well managed at all. Okay. For those of you that raised your hand now, I want you to, at least some of you, to tell us what it is, if you could fix one thing that's not being addressed, what would it be? What one health thing about your treatments, about your condition that you wish the treatments would better address? Okay, Elizabeth?
My biggest thing that I think impacts me the most are the migraines, and as Deborah mentioned, I do bilaterally C-through through C7 cervical facet radiofrequency ablation, but the nerves grow back. So, and they find that over time that they grow back more quickly. The biggest problem with that is the treatment itself is extremely painful. You have to be awake, you have to be alert. And they're going into your spine. And then I get a flare up from that for a good month, and then I start to settle down again. But I think that for me, that's one of the biggest issues, sort of, in terms of that some of the treatments can be very painful in and of themselves and cause flares. Mm-hmm. And finding doctors that know what they're doing too. That luckily I'm by Stanford, so that helps. But it's not, everyone's not in that situation. And the expense. It's hard we spend $25,000 a year out of pocket on medical treatments. And it's been 10 years, so there you go.
Thank you. A couple others. We have back there, and then Shay has her hand up.
Oh, okay. Hi. I think that even if my pain levels stayed where they are right now, if I just had more energy,
I feel like I would be in such better shape, because it's really like being so exhausted that I can't get anything done, and then I haven't gotten anything done, so it leads to be kind of depressed about having not gotten anything done, and then I eat a chocolate cake and gain more weight, and I mean, it's a vicious cycle. So I think it's the fatigue thing. Like I need super caffeine. That would be great.
Hi, Sharon. If I could have a perfect treatment, it would be able to regulate my sleep cycle. In bed, I do not sleep. I stay awake. I'm fully awake. I know everything that goes on. I know when the dog get up and I hear his toenails clicking on the wooden floor. I know when the deer pass through my window because they make the little noise. But anywhere else, I sleep. I sleep sitting at my desk. I sleep behind the wheel driving home, to and from. I now take something to manage that just so I can stay awake during the day and hold a job. I got fired for sleeping on the job. I knew they knew I was sleeping, but I was too embarrassed to admit I was sleeping on the job. So they fired me, and I just didn't say anything, and I just went away.
Thank you, Sharon. FDA, do you have, so we have a follow-up question from Bob.
This is, I neglected to ask this earlier, that have any of you been treated with or tried to take any type of stimulants to treat the fatigue? And if you have, of those people, how many of you have had success with that?
Okay, so how many use stimulants or tried them? Okay, a few. How many found them effective? Okay. Would you like any description? Because they make me be the timekeeper, so I keep my eye on this clock. We'll let Jan go.
One important component that has not been brought up here today is muscle relaxants. That's a class of medications. Some of the benzodiazepines really are useful for people with fibromyalgia.
Okay, thanks, Jan. Okay, Gwen, and then we'll let Gwen, and then we'll go to Liz's question.
Yeah, I feel like one of the most important components of our treatment plan is having a treatment provider that's educated about chronic pain, about fibromyalgia, and will sit with us and work with us, because it's more than a 15-minute session. Because you see how complicated our conditions are, and it's just not one condition. So we need a team of providers that are going to be working with us, that are going to listen and believe us.
Yeah. So Liz.
Right. I just wanted to ask, since your diagnosis, have you ever had a time when you've been pain-free or symptom-free? Or once you get the diagnosis, do you always have some level of symptoms? So I don't know, maybe if you can ask this as a show of hands or something like that.
Sure. How many of you have periods where you are completely symptom-free? Okay. Okay, so maybe we haven't heard about that, I don't think. So can one of you explain that just briefly, when that happens, how long it happens? Okay, right here.
I was diagnosed in 1989. Directly afterward, I didn't have much trouble. One of the things I think that helped me a lot is I used to live in Colorado. The dry environment, the high pressure there, the sunny skies, I didn't have any trouble while I was living in Colorado. And in 2002, I moved to Minnesota. And within 2 months of living in Minnesota, I can't even call it a flare, because it lasted for a couple of years. It was just, I had no control over my fibromyalgia at all. And ever since then, I've been working at correcting it. But even in Minnesota, though, usually during the winter months, January and February, I would be without pain for 2 months. And I think that once again, it was the dry air, it was the high barometric pressure. But because once the summertime came, once March came, I would start feeling the pain again. Unfortunately, that was before, and now it's pretty much constant. But I did have symptom-free.
How many of you, show of hands, find that weather can affect positively and negatively your symptoms? Oh, okay, just show of hands. Okay, then since we don't have time to delve into that, if you're going to put in your comments on the website, I'm seeing some nods from my colleagues. Please describe that and other triggers, other factors that trigger your symptoms to make them better or worse. I want to make sure we can get to the phone. So again, the question that we would really like to have addressed is if there was some aspect of your condition that's not yet that maybe hasn't been talked about yet that you would find an ideal treatment would address. So, operator, can we have a caller?
Yes, and we do have a question from Mike Herman. Your line is open.
Hi, Mike. Oh, and Mike, can we ask you to speak as... Oh, Mike, excuse me. We have a hard time hearing you, so can we ask you to speak as loud as you can directly into your phone?
Okay. It's more of a statement than a question, I guess.
Okay.
About fibromyalgia, it being a syndrome, a collection or signs and symptoms, more than I think, which come under the category of a disease. It takes a very long time for most people, to get to the point of a true diagnosis. When you get to the diagnosis, because it's so much more generalized and specific, so many people do get caught up into the pharmaceutical end of it and then try to find alternative types of treatment. And if there's just a way of shortening up the curve on all of that, I think it would just be tremendous. So, versus putting Band-Aids on things, trying to come up with more, diagnostic specific, I can't even talk, specific to the problem so that things can be treated and diagnosed and treated better and in a shorter period of time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike, for that point. Can we have one more caller, operator?
Yes, our next question is from Lauren Horowitz.
Hi, Lauren.
Your line is open.
Hi. I've been diagnosed in 2004, and I've been a guinea pig for 10 years. I don't understand. I live in Florida. It's a chronic. I tried everything, the latest being low-dose naltrexone, and I put all my hopes into that, and it didn't work. So I'm currently on Cymbalta, but I don't understand what the problem is with doctors writing pain medicine for chronic pain. I'm 52. I live in bed. I live alone, and I don't understand. The other thing that wasn't brought up that I don't know if anybody else has is I actually have pain even in my scalp.
Lauren, you're getting head nods both for your first comment and the second and the symptom that you raised. So thank you very much for that. I did promise, I think that's all the time we have for the phone now, but I did promise that if those of you who raised your hand to my earlier question about that your experiences were completely different from those on the panel, that I would come back to you and ask you. So if you had some important point to share about your experience with treatments, and it hasn't been talked about today, depending on how many hands we have, we can address those for a few minutes. Okay, so we'll take the hands that are up. Briefly, please.
Hello.
Hi, Sabrina.
Sabrina. I have a special circumstance. Due to stomach problems, I no longer have a stomach. I had 95% of my stomach removed. So I can't take my regular fibromyalgia medicine anymore. It has to be either dissolvable, chewable, or in liquid form. So out of the multitude that I was taking before my surgery, I'm down to 2, liquid gabapentin and liquid hydrocodone. So my goal would be that there would be a, whatever drug comes along next, that it would be either chewable, dissolvable, or in liquid form. And then a question you asked earlier about how long do you go before you find out if it's effective or not. My doctor asked me to stay on the medication for 8 weeks before I started crying that it doesn't work. Okay. So at least 8 weeks. And then if I have adverse side effect within the first couple of weeks, we stop it right away.
Okay. Anyone? Okay, there.
Briefly, I think the bottom line is the inflammation, and I do my best. I have created a combination of 6 different anti-inflammatory herb, including, I don't remember all of it, but mainly turmeric, cumin, fenugreek, and few others. And I take half a teaspoon almost every day, sometimes every other day. The only medication I take when my pain and discomfort and flare-up is about 9 to 10 on the scale of 0 to 10. I take 400 milligram of ibuprofen, and it helps me a lot. Of course, as I earlier I said, watching what I eat, right exercise, and trying to do a stress management, I've been doing very well. And one additional comment is, for ladies, that's my experience. As you age and as you get into menopause, you get better in terms with fibromyalgia.
Thank you very much. Okay, 2 more comments. I saw 2 hands. Oh, I'm sorry. We're going to go with Heather, and then we're going to end with Louis, and then the web comments. Heather, right here.
Thank you. I represent about 100 people in southern New Jersey in my support group, and they would be really mad at me if I don't bring up low-dose naltrexone, because our members who have tried it, it has changed their life, because it has helped with lowering certain types of pain, not all of it, but certain types of pain. It has helped with improving fatigue, and it has also helped us with our immune system as far as not getting sick as often as we used to. But it does take a good 6 months before you notice the difference. But since it is a generic, we feel like there needs to be so much more research done on it to see if it helps more people.
Okay. And then Louis, a final comment?
I would just like to say in reference to his comment about stimulants, not only is it a good thing for your fatigue, a lot of schools of thought look at it as being a catalyst to make opioids work better.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I know that there is so much more to talk about, but we are going to close this portion of the discussion. I want to thank you. We've had several meetings, and this meeting has been truly, I think, a very productive discussion on things that are very important to FDA about specific symptoms, about treatments, how they're working, what's not working, what's the downsides are. And so I really want to thank everyone in the room for your contributions today, and for your patience, and for listening to one another and answering our questions, and being quite open about things that are often very difficult to talk about in a room full of strangers. So I want to thank you. I want to again thank the panelists. I'm going to walk over to get the public comment set up. And while I do, James, are there additional web comments that struck you as being unique to the conversation?
I think I just want to emphasize a few things that were comments about what participants would want in new therapies. I think over the course of the entire day, one of the themes was how many of the patients had to stop taking many of the treatments, whether they be the prescription treatments or some of the other prescription treatments that were not specifically for fibromyalgia, and even over-the-counter products because of side effects. So there were a lot of people said that they would like to see products that help address both pain and fatigue, but with lower immediate and long-term side effects. I think the web participants agreed with the room that they would also like to see new therapies focusing on the fatigue first, that they seem to be able to manage their pain more so now with current therapies. And then ultimately they would like to see therapies that are not just focused on symptoms, but trying to stop the underlying progression of fibromyalgia.
Thank you very much, James. If there were topics that are important to you that we haven't addressed, please, again, send us a comment through the website. Even if you sent us one already, feel free to send us another comment following up on things that we've talked about today or addressing something that we didn't get a chance to discuss. And with that, I'm going to move into the open public comment session. Again, the purpose of this part of the meeting is to allow an opportunity for people to comment on topics other than our main discussion topics. And it's also a chance for stakeholders other than patients or patient representatives to contribute. Keep in mind, we won't be addressing any comments that we hear during this session, but all the comments that we have are being transcribed. We're in listening mode. We'd like this to be a transparent process, so we encourage you to note any financial interests that may be relevant to your comment. If you do not have any such financial interests, you may wish to state that for the record. But if you prefer not to state this information, you can still provide your comments. So we collected sign-ups before the meeting and during the break, and we have 6 speakers lined up. I'm going to ask you to stay to 3 minutes for your comments. Again, you can follow up your comments with the public docket as well. We're not going to use the timer for this portion, just like we didn't use the timer for any other portion, but I am keeping track of time, and I will be asking you to wrap up if you go beyond your 3 minutes, just to make sure we can keep everything moving along fairly and efficiently. Okay? So first we have, I'm going to read all the names so you know your order. We have Sally Oaken. Oh, and I apologize if I mispronounce any of these names. Elizabeth, you know your last name. Ray Gleason, Kristin Ogden, Lewis Ogden, and then Juan Mendoza. Okay, so we'll start with Sally. You can stay where you are, and the microphone will come to you.
Great. Thank you so much, and thank you so much for this hearing. My name is Sally Oaken, and I'm from Patients Like Me. We're a web-based environment. It's a research-based platform with a social connectedness and networking component to it. I'm happy to be here on behalf of our 40,000 members who are living with fibromyalgia. When we did a 4-day survey in December in anticipation of this meeting, we sent a survey out to about 8,000 members, and we had a 20% response rate within that 4 days. So there's a lot of interest in giving you feedback and giving you information. One of the things that hasn't been brought up that I want to just reemphasize is that there is much to learn from real-world evidence, and we need a systematic way of collecting this data. These meetings are great, but we really need to hear the voices of more people in a systematic, quantifiable way. One of the things that we have, I think, as an advantage on Patients Like Me is the ability to have that research-based component so patients can actually tell us about their symptoms and their treatments and their side effects. And a number of things did come up in our survey when we asked questions about this. So one of the things that hasn't been brought up in terms of the context of treatments is really the social connectedness dose effect. We learned that there's a significant amount of patients who are either using our site to provide some of their own support, but other social media sites as well, and it's having an impact on their overall outcomes and their ability to cope. Diet, nutrition, and personalized exercise programs were also high on the list. Interestingly, 66% of the patients reported not taking any of the FDA-approved products at this time or in the last month or so. Many have tried them in the past and have moved on to other things. So this is another opportunity for us to start thinking about what other things are they taking. So 52% of those patients reported taking some other prescription medication. We have the metadata to start telling you what they're taking and why they're taking it so that we have that off-label information that could be quite useful in terms of thinking about next steps in new drug development. The other thing I wanted to raise was the impact of side effects. We heard some about that today. But we did ask about their concern as well as some of the bothersomeness characteristics of this. So 72% of our patients are very concerned or concerned about side effects. 50% report having some side effect to the medications that they've been taking that are prescription medications. And 35% are making adjustments to the dose or frequency, and 30% are stopping altogether. So these are adherence issues that we could begin to tease out and better understand. Lastly, I'd like to just suggest that we have to have a better way of helping patients tell clinicians and others about the effects they're feeling. 63% of these patients reported adverse events to their healthcare providers, but we really don't have any way of knowing whether those ever made it into any of the information that FDA gets because of the voluntary component of reporting by health providers. 37% have had an adverse event but never told anyone about it. And only 1% reported to the FDA or the manufacturer. So we're missing a huge amount of the information we may need to better understand this. And lastly, what I'd like to just really reinforce is the heterogeneity of this condition is significant. Only 2% of the patients who followed up on the survey reported fibromyalgia as their only condition. And in fact, we collected over 90 different comorbid conditions from that one group of patients. So the response rate, as I said, was about 20%. It was about over 1,500 patients that contributed to the survey. And I received hundreds and hundreds of messages after the survey with additional information, which we will post to the docket.
Thank you very much, Sally. Next, we have Elizabeth Joniak Grant. Did I?
Hi again. Very briefly, one thing I want to point out that other people I haven't heard mentioned is that the longer I'm on the medications, the more side effects I seem to start developing. I saw it particularly around year 3 and year 4. I started getting unexplained tachycardia, palpitations, I had petechial rashes, now I'm getting skin lesions. And the longer I'm on the medicine, the more sort of the infrequent ones from the clinical studies I'm developing. The second thing is if you read about Lyrica, they actually report that they had an unexpectedly high incidence of hemangiosarcomas in 2 different strains of mice. This is a very aggressive cancer that they usually only see in dogs, and they actually had 1% of the people in the clinical trials that developed new or worsening pre-existing tumors. And what it says is, this could be significant, we're not sure if it's significant. And then if you do any research, look through the medical stuff, look through journals, it's kind of like, oh well. It didn't happen in the rats though, and that's how it's left. So I think really if people are looking at being on some of these medicines for decades, this notion of kind of re-examining this issue with hemangiosarcoma is important in terms of Lyrica. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up is this notion of fertility issues. I'm in my mid-30s, and for those of us that are diagnosed at a younger age where we haven't had children yet and want to consider having them, there's ideas that, one, fibromyalgia may be linked to fertility issues and infertility problems. Endometriosis is already established, but also low antral follicle counts. But then fertility issues also seem to come up from the medications, the SSRIs like Cymbalta. They're showing that it's damaging sperm and the DNA of sperm. So I'm thinking, why don't we look at some eggs and see what it's doing to the DNA? And then also, practically speaking, what does a person do who wants to have children and is on the medications? Do you come off the medications, which is what I've chosen to do because of the very limited studies about some of the severe birth defects they have found, again, only in animal studies. And then can you even manage to be pregnant without the meds? For me, the decision is no, we're going through a gestational carrier eventually. And then that brings up the whole other issue of the discontinuation syndrome, which if anyone's gone through with the Cymbalta, especially, or the Lyrica, is a very, very, very difficult. I'd say it's the hardest thing I've ever gone through, and I just got through it in the last 2 weeks. And trying to get the FDA mandates to start happening in terms of dealing with that and the tapering.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Elizabeth. We have Ray Gleason. If you can raise your hand.
Again, my name is Ray Gleason. I'm the Medical Education and Research Director for the National Fibromyalgia and Chronic Pain Association. I have been doing this work for 20 years. I helped create the National Fibromyalgia Research Association in Salem, Oregon, and was responsible for heading up 5 international research symposiums. And so through the years, there's been a lot of work that's been done, and I do think that we're farther ahead, at least in published papers, than we were when I started so many years ago. But one of the things that we still are lacking is a diagnosis. And the problem with having treatments for fibromyalgia is if you can't get a diagnosis, there isn't any place to start. And there's a couple of things that happen with that. Some of it's financial. If you look at the problems of not being able to function in a position, in a job, you lose productivity and eventually you lose a position, which isn't good for either you or your employer. And the other part of it is the medical costs themselves add to that financial burden. If you look at the Institute of Medicine's Pain in America report that was published in 2011, it talks about a bill of about $650 billion a year spent on pain, and there still really isn't a whole lot of answers for that in terms of how it's approached. So for diagnosis, the other big problem in fibromyalgia is the lack of education for our medical doctors. We still have medical schools that don't teach anything about fibromyalgia, so we have all these new doctors that come out and they don't know anything about it, much less how to diagnose it or how to treat it. And I've been working with that. We've put on about 20 medical education CME programs for that. And so the thing is that with our diagnostic criteria now, there's 3 going to 4. It's very confusing for doctors to know how to diagnose it. And there is a blood test. That's the FMA blood test that has been researched at the University of Illinois that is very specific. And I think it's something that we should think about to help people not take 5 years still today, even after 3 FDA-approved medications, to get a diagnosis of fibromyalgia.
Thank you very much, Ray. We have Kristin Ogden. Okay.
Thank you. I'd like to start by thanking the FDA for having this meeting. I think it's terrific. I only wish it had happened for me and Louis maybe 30 or 40 years ago, so that perhaps things may have gone a little better for him along the way. We've been married 41 years. He's a great guy. You've all gotten to know him at least a little bit because he's spoken up a time or 2 here. I appreciate the atmosphere of courtesy and respect that was established at the beginning of this meeting. We came here not knowing whether we would speak about his recent use of high-dose opioids as the treatment that has for him been most helpful and most effective. And when I say not knowing whether we would speak about it, I do believe there remains a certain stigma associated with the use of these medications. Clearly, we are not insensitive to the fact that they are abused and that they have caused harm in some circumstances. But I can tell you, in all honesty, that this man has been benefited tremendously by them. We have been pursuing almost nonstop help for his pain problems since 1997. We began seeking help for his illness in the 1980s, and at that time, the answers were, Mr. Ogden, you look like a young, healthy man, your labs are normal. If you say you hurt, I can't disprove it, but the implication is, well, it's all in your head. I think a lot of people still don't get it about severe pain. I think there are a lot of pain doctors who don't still really get it about extremely severe, constant pain. When we made the decision in 2010 to pursue high-dose opioid treatment for him, it wasn't something that we approached lightly. All you have to do is read the newspaper to know that going down that path might likely produce challenges and difficulties. I was, I have to say, astonished at how helpful it was and how quickly. And there have not been any significant side effects. These medications do not, in his case, make him drowsy or drugged. Our lives have simply been made better. While these substances are disabling to some individuals, they have been enabling to my husband, and we have had the best life for the last 3.5 years that we've had in decades. It's difficult. There are no doctors in Virginia who use these medications. at the doses Lewis takes. So for the last 3.5 years, we have been traveling to California every 12 weeks for treatment with a doctor who specializes in treating intractable pain. His name is Forrest Tennant, and he has been in practice there since 1975. I couldn't imagine my life getting much better until we recently were notified, and I'm a federal employee. Let me just say that to you folks at the FDA. Like you, I'm a federal employee. I have 36 years service. I always thought the Federal Employee Health Benefits Program was the best insurance anybody could get of middle-income lifestyle. But we got a letter in September from Blue Cross Blue Shield saying they decided Lewis's dose of medication is not medically necessary and that they were only going to pay for half of it.
Kristin.
And so we're paying out of pocket.
Kristin, I'm going to ask
Yes.
you to just wrap it up, please.
I'm taking Lewis's 3 minutes.
Oh,
We're sharing.
okay. All right, then you've got
I just need to let you know
2.5 more minutes.
that we still have issues of stigma and lack of understanding. We are paying out of pocket while we fight this through the disputed claims process. We have, in our first step, cited the FDA decision letter that was issued in September 2013 that acknowledged that these medications in high doses are helpful to some people. In that decision, responding to a petition from PROP, the FDA decided not to impose daily dose limits or duration limits because there was no scientific evidence to support doing that. When we replied to Blue Cross requesting reconsideration, we provided a copy of that letter. We quoted that letter. We provided other letters from the AMA and the American Pain Society, American Academy of Pain Management, to say, look, some people need these medications, and Blue Cross so far has blown us off. And it's costing us over $5,000 a month. And although I do have a good job, we cannot afford that. Lewis?
I would just like to add that we need to do something to get rid of the stigma. It seems that it's looked at as being a drug of abuse, first, and the media, the doctors, you wouldn't believe some of the things I've been called, a drug addict, these kinds of things. God, I forgot where I was going because of fibro fog. I'm an outlier, if you want to. Everybody, I'm sure, is familiar with the standard bell curve. I'm somewhere over here, at the very tip end of this as an outlier. And it seems to me that instead of spending so much time concerning ourselves with the number of people who abuse these medications, that we need to worry about people who have problems like I do and have such good results from them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lewis. And we have, I think it's Juan Mendoza?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Juan Mendoza, Vice President of the National Fibromyalgia Partnership. Our mission is to make medically accurate, quality resource information on fibromyalgia available to our membership, healthcare professionals, and the community at large. Our goal is to provide informational tools so as to promote the timely and appropriate diagnosis and treatment of fibromyalgia. Briefly, it was mentioned trigger points and tender points. I consider that it's important to distinguish between the two. There is a condition which is misunderstood, called chronic myofascial pain syndrome. That deals, which is prevalent in fibromyalgia patients. This condition occurs when hyper-irritable spots, called trigger points, can cause severe pain and disability, and their pain can also complicate the assessment of fibromyalgia pain. So it is important that to educate our healthcare providers between the two, because they are not the same. Okay, because of lack of time and our statements is on the docket, I'm just going to move on to significant downsides current treatments. One is the price of medication and treatments is often high. It is often in the case of non-drug treatments not covered by insurance. The other is long-term safety of a drug is not known. And finally, effective medications without any adverse, the ideal condition, it will be effective medications without any adverse effects. Effects will be ideal, of course. However, in the meantime, it will be extremely helpful to encourage head-to-head comparison trials conducted by fibromyalgia researchers with no stake in the outcome. More analytical assessments and meta-analysis will be helpful as well. Only a few of these currently exist for the newest fibromyalgia drugs. And finally, in addition to finding better ways to effectively treat the pain and fatigue of fibromyalgia, it is useful to develop a systematic approach. This is important, a systematic approach which can improve A, sleep patterns that produce better sleep, B, physical rehabilitation to improve functionality, and C, psychological and emotional therapy when needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all those who contributed to the public comment. Our closing, do you want to?
Can we make just a couple of
Sure.
clarifying comments? Sure. I'll talk and you can do it. There were a number of comments today that I heard just now and earlier about sort of a range of problems that you're having. One is Ray, I believe, talked about the cost of chronic pain to society, and Louis, you're having trouble getting your drugs. And I heard from people at the break who came up and talked to me about, how do we get our voices heard as fibromyalgia patients when people don't believe we're sick? There is power in numbers, and I strongly encourage you to join with your advocacy organizations, with Jan and others, to have your voices heard, because that's how you make changes for yourself and for your community. So please do, there are ways that you can make your voices heard.
Thank you. Okay, then we'll have Sharon Hertz come up and give some closing remarks. And as she's walking up here, I'm just going to remind you all that there are evaluation forms up at the registration table. If you could take a few minutes to fill that out, tell us what we are doing well, what could be improved. It's really helpful to us. So thank you. Thank you, Sharon.
Hi, all. There's a lot to summarize, but before I even get there, in very little time, but before I even get there, some of the comments that I've heard, I don't know how often people are accessing the actual approved labeling for these products, but I'm hearing things about side effects that aren't known, but in fact they're in the labeling. And you may have seen me on the BlackBerry. I swear I wasn't emailing. I was looking some things up to be sure that I didn't misspeak. But some of the side effects, including sexual dysfunction and some others, are actually listed for some of these drugs. So I know that many of these products come with patient labeling, and that tends to be shorter. But please know that there's a lot more information available in the full product labeling, or package insert we call it, and you can access those a number of different ways on our web as well as other resources. The hemangiosarcoma issue in particular I did want to mention, because when we follow a product through its development, we take these things quite seriously, and I was actually involved with our regulatory oversight at the time that signal became apparent. And I can't go into some of the details about what we did at the time, but we did do quite a bit. And we never say, well, it was positive in one and negative in another species, therefore we're not going to. Trust me, we're never that simple. We actually required the sponsor to do work to prove that there was a reason why one species was being more susceptible to this than another. And we got compelling data to suggest that was in fact a species-specific or centric type of finding. So please know that we do take a very serious look at all of the information coming in as we're developing these drugs. And a lot of this information is available online. Our reviews, I know, it's hard. From my desk, I actually often revert to Google rather than our search window. But if you Google for an FDA review on a drug, it's actually often very helpful. And I'm going to throw this to the advocacy organizations because I suspect they may have folks who can also help with navigating some of these paths. Today we heard some very, very helpful information from you folks, and really appreciate you taking the time. We understand the challenge for many people who are suffering from chronic pain to travel and participate in these meetings, and we greatly value your effort. Some of the important things that I've heard are speaking to a lot of the heterogeneity within the symptoms in fibro, and we very much are aware that there's never going to be a one-size-fits-all for the population, or potentially even to address all of any one person's symptoms. We heard quite a bit about the different manifestations of pain and fatigue, some interesting symptoms that we hadn't heard much about in the past, including the eye pain and visual symptoms, some of the other things, including the feeling cold. The stiffness was very interesting for me to hear. That was one in particular I wasn't as familiar with. And I think that the emphasis that we've heard on multimodal therapy is very important. We will do our part to help facilitate the drug part of that treatment. When we get applications coming in, we'll try and do our due diligence to make sure that we do identify all the safety associated issues as well as the benefits, so that as you and your prescribers get together, you can make informed decisions about the available risks. And we will continue to try and make sure that as information becomes available, we update information. And I think those are the key points that I wanted to just summarize. In addition, also, we heard the message about more targeting of certain symptoms. It would be nice to see some therapeutics in those areas, including fatigue and sleep-associated issues. So once again, thank you, and please take time once you get home and settled again to send in any additional comments to the docket. We will review them all.
Okay, before Sarah wraps up, I just wanted to follow up with something Sharon said about our labeling and reviews. One fairly easy way of finding that stuff is just to Google drugs @ sign, so drugs @ FDA. And there you'll see the alphabet, and you can search for your drug by name and eventually get to the approval document, the review memos that are written by our scientific disciplines, as well as the approved labeling. So just want to mention that.
Thank you very much. Well, drugs @ FDA.
Just Google drugs @ FDA. And it's
Yep.
the first hit.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you again. I hope that everyone has safe travels home, whether, again, it's just around the Beltway or whether you are traveling to further distances. And I just want to echo my colleagues again and say thank you so much. As patients and patient representatives, you are the input of this meeting, and it's very important and very valuable. Thank you.